My ex took credit for my work. I revealed the signed originals. She stole my work, and for a while, everyone believed her. That's how my betrayal story begins, not with anger, but with silence. If you enjoy emotional storytelling, real-life drama, and stories where justice is served, make sure you subscribe, like this story, and stay with me till the end because what happened next completely changed everything. My name is Ethan Cole, and this is the story of how my ex took credit for my work, and how I slowly uncovered the truth that shocked everyone around us. Back then, life felt simple. I was focused, driven, and building something I truly believed in. I wasn't loud about my ideas, but I was consistent. I worked late nights, early mornings, and every small moment in between. That project, the one that would later become the center of this workplace drama, was my pride. It was more than just work, it was a piece of me. And then there was Lena Voss. Lena wasn't just my partner in life, she was my partner in ambition, or at least that's what I thought. She had this confidence that drew people in. She knew how to speak, how to present, how to make even a small idea sound powerful. When we first got together, it felt like we balanced each other. I created, she communicated. I built, she sold. People admired us. They called us a perfect team. But what they didn't see was how things slowly began to shift. At first, it was small. She would ask to review my work. She would sit next to me, watching closely, asking questions, taking notes. I thought she was interested, supportive even. That's what people in a relationship do, right? They support each other. That's what I told myself. Looking back now, those were the early signs of a toxic relationship, but I didn't want to see it. I trusted her. I shared everything. Every draft, every idea, every detail of my project was open to her. I had nothing to hide, and I never imagined I needed to protect what I was building. One night, I remember clearly, I showed her the full concept. It was complete, structured, and ready to be presented. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "This is brilliant, Ethan. This could change everything." That moment stayed with me, not because of what she said, but because of how genuine it felt. Or maybe, how convincing it felt. Days passed, then weeks. I kept refining my work, adding more value, making sure it was strong enough to stand in any room. Meanwhile, Lena started becoming busier. More meetings, more calls, more opportunities, she said. I didn't question it. I was happy for her. I believed we were growing together. But something didn't feel right. There was a distance, not just emotionally, but in the way she spoke about work. She stopped asking about my progress. She stopped sitting next to me during those late nights. Instead, she would step out to take calls, lowering her voice, keeping things private. That was new. One evening, I asked her directly, "Is everything okay?" She smiled again, that same confident smile, and said, "Of course. I'm just trying to create something bigger for us." For us. Those words were enough to silence my doubts. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Because the alternative? That the person closest to me was hiding something? That wasn't something I was ready to face. Then came the moment that changed everything, even though I didn't realize it at the time. Lena told me she had an important presentation coming up. A big one. She said it could open doors, bring investors, and change her career completely. I supported her, of course. I even helped her prepare, giving feedback, suggesting improvements, helping her structure her pitch. What I didn't know, what I couldn't see yet, was that I was helping build the very thing that would later be used against me. That was the beginning of the betrayal, hidden behind support, trust, and love. And like most betrayal stories, it didn't come with a warning. It came quietly, step by step, until the damage was already done. If you've ever trusted someone completely, if you've ever believed in a partnership only to later question everything, then you understand how this feels. This wasn't just about stolen credit. This was about trust being broken in the most personal way. About watching someone you believed in slowly turn into someone you didn't recognize. At that point, I still didn't know the full truth. I didn't know my work was already being presented without my name. I didn't know my ideas were becoming her success. I didn't know that behind every opportunity she mentioned, there was a piece of me she had taken. But deep down, something was shifting. Something wasn't right. And that feeling, that quiet voice in the back of my mind, would soon become impossible to ignore. Because this wasn't just a relationship anymore. This was business betrayal. And soon, the truth would be exposed. The moment I realized my work was no longer mine didn't come with a loud announcement. It came quietly, like most betrayal stories do, hidden inside a normal day that suddenly didn't feel normal anymore. If you've ever experienced workplace drama or a toxic relationship where trust slowly turns into doubt, then you'll understand exactly how this felt. It started with a message. Just a simple message from Ryan Carter, my closest friend and someone who had seen me build this project from the ground up. He didn't say much, just sent a link and wrote, "Ethan, you need to see this." I remember opening it without thinking twice, expecting something ordinary. But what I saw wasn't ordinary. It was Lena. Standing confidently in a room full of people, presenting. That wasn't the shocking part. Lena had always been good at presenting. The shocking part was what she was presenting. My work. My exact ideas. My structure. My words. Everything. For a second, I just stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My mind refused to accept it. There had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe she mentioned me. Maybe this was something we had discussed. Maybe this was still us, just presented differently. I kept watching, hoping for something, anything, that would prove this wasn't what it looked like. But it never came. There was no mention of me. No credit. No acknowledgement. Just her, standing there, owning everything I had created. That was the moment the truth hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This was stolen credit. And suddenly, everything started making sense. The late night calls. The distance. The secrecy. The shift in her behavior. It all connected. Every small detail I ignored now stood out clearly. This wasn't support. This wasn't partnership. This was business betrayal, planned and executed right in front of me. I called her immediately. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed calm. "Lena, I just watched your presentation." There was a pause on the other end. Not long, but long enough. "Oh, that," she said casually, like it was nothing. Like it didn't matter? "Yeah, it went well." Went well. Those words felt heavy. "That was my work," I said. Silence again. Then she laughed lightly, like I had said something unreasonable. "Ethan, don't start this," she replied. "We've talked about this. We've worked on things together." Together. That word again. But this time, it didn't feel comforting. It felt like manipulation. "No," I said, firmer now. "That wasn't together. That was mine." Her tone changed slightly, becoming sharper, more controlled. "You're overreacting," she said. "Ideas evolve. You can't own everything." That's when I realized something even deeper. She wasn't denying it. She was redefining it. Turning my work into something shared, something unclear, something she could claim without guilt. That's how toxic relationships operate. They don't always lie directly. Sometimes, they twist the truth until you start questioning yourself. For a moment, I almost did. I almost wondered if I was being too emotional, too protective, too sensitive. But then I remembered the nights I spent building that project. The documents. The drafts. The structure. The details she had never contributed to. No. This wasn't confusion. This was the truth being stolen and reshaped. You presented my work as yours, I said again, this time without hesitation. She sighed, clearly annoyed now. Ethan, listen, she said, her voice dropping into that calm, persuasive tone she used on others. This is bigger than you. This is an opportunity. For both of us. For both of us. But only her name was on that stage. Only she was receiving recognition. Only she was building success from what I created. That's when the emotional weight hit me fully. This wasn't just about stolen credit. This was about betrayal on a personal level. Someone I trusted completely had taken something deeply important to me and used it for their own gain, without hesitation, without remorse. And what hurt even more was how easily she did it. Like it was normal. Like it was justified. Like I was the problem for questioning it. That's the power of manipulation. It doesn't just take from you. It makes you doubt your right to what's yours. After that call, everything changed. I wasn't just dealing with a relationship anymore. I was dealing with a full-blown workplace drama where the lines between personal and professional were completely blurred. People started talking. Word spread about Lena's brilliant presentation. Her name was everywhere. Praise, recognition, new opportunities. And me? I was invisible. Worse than invisible, I was irrelevant. Because in their eyes, she was the creator. She was the one who brought the idea to life. That's how fast the narrative changed. That's how quickly the truth can be buried when someone controls the story. I tried to speak up at first. I mentioned it to a colleague, Sophie Lane. She listened, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Not because she didn't respect me, but because Lena had already positioned herself as the owner of the idea. That's how these situations work. The first version of the story people hear becomes their truth. And Lena had already told hers. That was the hardest part. Watching the truth get replaced in real time. Watching my work become her success. Watching people believe it without question. But deep down, something inside me refused to accept it. I knew what I had created. I knew the effort, the detail, the originality behind it. And no matter how convincing her version was, it didn't erase the truth. It only covered it temporarily. And that's when a different feeling started to grow. Not just anger. Not just frustration. Something more focused. Something more controlled. Because if there's one thing about stories like this, about betrayal stories and justice-served moments, it's that the truth doesn't stay hidden forever. And I had something she didn't expect. Something she thought didn't matter. Something that would eventually expose everything. But at that moment, standing alone with the weight of everything that had just happened, I wasn't thinking about revenge yet. I was thinking about survival. About understanding how far this had gone. Because one thing was clear. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was intentional. And I had just become part of a story where the truth was buried, but not lost. Everything changed after that day, not all at once, but slowly, like a quiet collapse that no one else seemed to notice except me. If you're enjoying this emotional storytelling and real-life drama, make sure you subscribe, like this story, and stay with me because this chapter is where everything falls apart before justice is served. I wish I could say I fought back immediately, that I stood up in the middle of the workplace drama and exposed the truth right away, but that's not how it happened. The truth is, I started losing. Not just my position, not just my voice, but my place in everything I had built. Lena's version of the story was already out there, and it was strong. She had confidence, visibility, and most importantly, belief from others. People trusted her. They saw her as the face of something innovative, something powerful. And me? I was just the guy quietly standing in the background, trying to explain something that sounded like jealousy instead of truth. That's the harsh reality of stolen credit. Once someone claims your work publicly, it becomes incredibly difficult to take it back without proof. And at that moment, I didn't present any. I kept thinking that people would see through it, that someone would notice the gaps, the inconsistencies, the parts that didn't fully align with her understanding. But that didn't happen. Instead, her success grew. Meetings turned into deals. Deals turned into recognition. Her name started circulating in rooms I had once dreamed of entering. And every time I heard it, every time I saw her being praised for something I created, it felt like a slow, constant reminder of the betrayal. Ryan tried to support me. He told me to speak louder, to push harder, to fight for my work. But it wasn't that simple. This wasn't just business betrayal, it was personal. It was tied to emotions, memories, and a relationship that had once meant something real. And that made everything heavier. There were days I questioned myself. Days I sat alone, replaying everything in my mind, wondering if I had somehow allowed this to happen. If I had been too open, too trusting, too careless. That's what toxic relationships do. They don't just hurt you, they make you feel responsible for the pain they caused. But even in that low point, something inside me stayed steady. A small, quiet certainty that refused to disappear. I knew the truth. And deep down, I knew I had something she didn't account for. It happened late one night. I was going through my files, not with a plan, not with a strategy, just trying to reconnect with what I had built. I opened old folders, reviewed early drafts, and traced the evolution of the project from its first idea to its final form. And that's when I saw it. The detail that changed everything. The signed originals. At first, it didn't seem like much. Just documents, neatly saved, with my name clearly attached, timestamps marking every stage of development, and most importantly, my signature confirming ownership. But the more I looked at them, the more I realized what they truly were. Proof revealed. Not opinions. Not claims. Not arguments. Evidence. Real, undeniable evidence that showed exactly where the work came from, who created it, and how it developed over time. My heart started beating faster, not from fear, but from clarity. For the first time since the betrayal began, I didn't feel lost. I felt grounded. This wasn't just a revenge story anymore. This was a path to justice served. Lena had built her success on presentation, on confidence, on perception. But I had something stronger. I had the truth, documented and signed. That was the moment everything shifted inside me. I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like someone preparing for a comeback. Not a loud, emotional reaction, but a calculated, controlled move. Because exposing the truth wasn't just about showing the documents. It was about timing, setting, and impact. I needed the right moment, the right audience, and the right approach. I couldn't afford to rush it. Meanwhile, Lena continued rising. Her confidence grew stronger, her influence expanded, and her version of the story became more solid in people's minds. But now, every time I saw her succeed, I didn't feel the same helpless anger. I felt something else. Patience. Because I knew something she didn't. I knew her success wasn't built on a foundation that could last. It was built on something taken, something fragile, something that could collapse the moment the truth was exposed. Sophie started noticing the shift in me. She approached me one day and said, "You seem different. Not defeated, just quiet." I looked at her and simply said, "I'm waiting." She didn't fully understand, but she didn't question it either. And that's the thing about turning points. They don't always come with loud announcements. Sometimes, they happen internally, in silence, in moments where everything finally makes sense. This chapter of my life wasn't about winning yet. It was about rebuilding. About finding my ground again after being pushed out of it. About turning pain into strategy. And most importantly, about preparing for the moment when everything would change. Because in every betrayal story, there's a phase where it feels like the truth has been buried for good. Where the person who did wrong seems untouchable, unstoppable, and ahead. But that's never the full story. The truth doesn't disappear. It waits. And I was done waiting without purpose. I had the proof. I had the clarity. And soon, I would have the moment. By the time I reached this point, I wasn't reacting anymore, I was preparing. If you're enjoying this betrayal story and you want to see how justice is served, make sure you subscribe, like this story, and stay with me because this chapter is where the comeback begins to take shape. I had spent days going through every file, every draft, every version of my work, organizing everything into something clear and undeniable. This was no longer just emotional storytelling or a real-life drama, this was strategy. Every document I found added weight to my case. The timestamps showed the timeline. The drafts showed the evolution. And the signed originals confirmed ownership. Together, they formed something powerful, something that could not be ignored or twisted. And that's exactly what I needed. Because Lena wasn't just confident, she was convincing. She had already built a narrative that people believed. If I wanted to break that narrative, I needed more than truth, I needed proof revealed in a way that forced people to see it. I couldn't just tell them. I had to show them. Ryan helped me put everything together. He looked at the documents, shaking his head, and said, "This is it, Ethan. This is your way back." But I wasn't thinking about getting back. I was thinking about getting it right. Timing was everything. If I revealed the truth too early, it could be dismissed. If I did it in the wrong setting, it could be ignored. I needed a moment where everyone was watching, where her credibility was at its highest, because that's where the fall would be the hardest. And then, the opportunity came. Lena announced another major presentation. Bigger audience, bigger stakes, more attention. This wasn't just another meeting, this was a defining moment in her rising success. Investors, executives, and decision-makers would all be there. The perfect stage. The perfect moment for the truth exposed. When I heard about it, I didn't react outwardly. I simply nodded and said nothing. But inside, everything aligned. This was it. The workplace drama that had pushed me into silence was about to shift. The same stage she used to build her success would become the place where everything changed. In the days leading up to the presentation, I stayed calm. Not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I had already processed it all. The anger, the frustration, the sense of loss, all of it had been replaced by focus. I reviewed my evidence again and again, making sure every detail was clear. I prepared not just to defend myself, but to present the truth in a way that left no room for doubt. Sophie approached me again, her curiosity stronger now. "You're planning something," she said quietly. I looked at her and replied, "I'm finishing something." She didn't ask more, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew something was coming. And she wasn't the only one. There was a shift in the air, something subtle but real. Maybe it was the way I carried myself. Or maybe it was just the calm before everything changed. The day of the presentation arrived, and the room was exactly what I expected. Full. Focused. Important. Lena stood at the front, confident as always, ready to present what everyone believed was her work. She looked composed, powerful, completely in control. And for a moment, I just watched. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with clarity. This was the peak of her version of the story. And peaks don't last forever. As she began speaking, I recognized every word, every idea, every structure. It was all mine. But this time, it didn't shake me. Because I knew something she didn't. I knew this was the last time she would present it as hers. When she finished, the room responded exactly as expected. Applause. Approval. Interest. Everything she had built was working perfectly. And that's when I moved. Not suddenly, not aggressively, but calmly and deliberately. Before we close, I said, my voice steady but clear enough to reach everyone in the room, there's something important that needs to be addressed. The room shifted. Attention moved. Lena's expression changed slightly, just for a second, but I saw it. A flicker of uncertainty. I stepped forward, holding the documents, the evidence, the truth she thought would stay hidden. This wasn't just a revenge story anymore. This was the moment where everything connected. What you've just seen, I continued, is not original work. Silence filled the room instantly. You could feel it, the tension, the confusion, the sudden break in the narrative everyone believed. Lena laughed lightly, trying to regain control. Ethan, this isn't the time, she said, her voice controlled but tight. But this time, I didn't stop. Actually, I said, placing the documents where everyone could see them, this is exactly the time. I opened the files, showing the drafts, the timelines, and finally, the signed originals. This is the work, I said. Documented, developed, and signed by me. The shift was immediate. Not loud, not chaotic, but undeniable. People leaned in. Eyes moved from her to me, from confidence to doubt, from belief to questioning. This was proof revealed in its purest form. No arguments. No emotions. Just facts. Lena tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to reshape the narrative like she had done before. But this time, it didn't work. Because this time, the truth wasn't something she could twist. It was something everyone could see. And that's the difference between claims and evidence. One can be challenged. The other cannot. Standing there, I didn't feel victorious yet. I felt something more important. Certain. Because for the first time since the betrayal began, the story was no longer controlled by her. It was finally balanced by the truth. And that moment, that exact moment, was where everything began to turn. The moment the truth settled into the room, everything changed, not with noise, not with chaos, but with a quiet shift that everyone could feel. If you've stayed with me through this betrayal story and you want to see how justice is served, make sure you subscribe, like, share this story, because this final chapter is where everything comes full circle. Lena stood there, still trying to hold on to control, but it was already slipping. The confidence that once filled her voice was now strained, uneven, uncertain. And the room that once believed her without question was now looking at her differently. That's the power of proof revealed. It doesn't need to shout, it simply replaces doubt with clarity. People started asking questions, not aggressively, but carefully, the kind of questions that come when belief begins to break. One of the investors stepped forward, picking up one of the documents I had laid out. He studied the timestamps, the structure, the signature, and then looked at Lena. "Can you explain this?" he asked calmly. It wasn't an accusation, but it didn't need to be. The evidence was already speaking. Lena tried to respond, tried to piece together something that could hold the narrative together, but this time, her words didn't carry the same weight. Because this wasn't about presentation anymore. This was about truth. And truth doesn't depend on delivery. It stands on its own. We collaborated, she said, her voice tighter now, less certain. This is being misunderstood. But the room wasn't responding the way it used to. The belief she once controlled had shifted, and now, every word she spoke sounded like an attempt to hold onto something that was already gone. Sophie stepped forward quietly, looking between us, then at the documents. Ethan built this, she said, her voice steady. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to confirm what others are already starting to see. That was the turning point. The moment when the story fully shifted. What was once seen as Lena's success was now being questioned, examined, and slowly unraveled. And me? I didn't interrupt, I didn't push, I didn't force anything. I simply stood there, letting the truth do its work. Because this was never about creating a scene. This was about restoring what had been taken. The workplace drama that once silenced me was now exposing itself in real time. The same room that once celebrated her was now pulling back, reassessing everything. Investors exchanged looks. Conversations changed direction. The energy in the room shifted completely. And Lena felt it. You could see it in the way she stood, in the way her posture changed, in the way her confidence no longer held steady. This was the cost of stolen credit. Not just losing what you gained, but losing the trust that came with it. One of the executives spoke next, his tone firm but controlled. We need to review this properly, he said. If this work is not originally yours, then this changes everything. And just like that, it did. Opportunities paused. Decisions were reconsidered. The momentum Lena had built began to collapse, not dramatically, but decisively. Because success built on something taken cannot survive when the truth is exposed. For a moment, Lena looked at me, really looked at me, not with confidence, not with control, but with something else. Something closer to realization. Maybe even regret. But by then, it didn't matter. Because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about me taking back what was mine. Ryan stepped up beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder, not saying anything, just standing there. And that meant more than words. Because through all of this, through the doubt, the loss, the isolation, he never stopped believing the truth would come out. And now, it had. The room slowly began to settle, but nothing was the same anymore. The narrative had changed completely. What was once hidden was now clear. What was once believed was now questioned. And what was once taken was now returned. That's what real justice feels like. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. I gathered my documents calmly, not in a rush, not in victory, just with a quiet sense of completion. Because this wasn't about proving a point anymore. The point had already been proven. As I walked out of that room, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel revenge. I felt something stronger. Closure. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about betrayal or stolen credit. It was a story about truth. About holding on to what you know is yours, even when the world starts to believe otherwise. About understanding that sometimes, the truth takes time, but when it arrives, it changes everything. Lena's success had been built on my work, but it couldn't stand once the truth was exposed. And me? I didn't just get my work back. I got my name back. My voice. My place. That's the thing about stories like this, about real-life drama and emotional storytelling. They remind you that no matter how convincing a lie may seem, it can never fully replace the truth. And when the truth finally comes forward, it doesn't just reveal what was hidden, it restores what was lost. So if you've ever felt overlooked, If you've ever been part of a toxic relationship or faced a moment where your work, your effort, or your voice was taken or ignored, remember this. The truth is not gone. It's waiting. And when the moment comes, it will speak louder than anything else.